So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for watching our very first episode of Great Minds Seeking Connection in the Human Experience. I'm so honored and so privileged to be here with these two amazing people, Dr. Kristel Carrington and Dr. Sudha Wanani. Did I pronounce that?
Close,
I'm
Wadhwani.
sorry.
Story of my life. We're all
I
good.
apologize. So, yeah, so I'm really excited to be here with these two amazing people. The whole purpose reason that we have decided to start this podcast-ish, is because we often forget that our shared humanity. We use our differences in appearance, birthplace, beliefs, and so forth as barriers to connection and understanding, when those are the things that should be celebrated and bring us together. That's why we believe that by expanding the discussions around mental health is a bridge to our understanding of one another. So in this podcast series overall, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and more, me, a mental health advocate and educator, we are going to discuss the interconnections of race, ethnicity, mental health, stigma, human experience, gender, you name it, with the hope of expanding our understanding of one another and connecting in our humanity. So please join us, connecting across our differences and share our similarities as we examine real issues and how we can build alliances to possibly impact our communities and our world. So in this very first episode, what we're going to do is Dr. Sudha, she's going to introduce herself briefly, very fast. And then I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more. Then we are going to take our time to really learn about Dr. Kristel, learn more about her. She's going to share about, so there's going to be a little bit like integration interview. So all right, Sudha, please tell
Hello,
us a little bit about
everyone.
yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation, getting to know Dr. Carrington a bit more. We've all presented together before, and I'm looking forward to connecting further and continuing this relationship together. I'm the coordinator of outreach. I was the coordinator of outreach and prevention at Montclair State University. In a few weeks, I'll be the coordinator of diversity, inclusion, and social justice initiatives. I'm a New Jersey licensed psychologist. And I'm passionate about diversity, DEI issues, and social and racial justice. And I look forward to this new venture that we're on together. Thank you for being in it with me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Sudha. So again, my name is J.R. Gould. I'm a professional speaker, trainer that specializes in mental health and diversity and inclusion training. I own my own company called Coffee with JR. So pretty much, yeah, my job is just talk about mental health and diversity and inclusion stuff, just stuff. So no big deal. So, without further ado, I think all of us are kind of itchy, want to learn more about Kristel, more about her. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dive in. We're just going to dive into like the good stuff, the goody stuff. So my very first question to her is, who was in the house? When you were growing up, who was in your house, and what was your neighborhood like when you were growing up?
Lovely question. So I am from Brooklyn, New York, grew up in Flatbush, and it's just home. It was a predominantly Caribbean neighborhood, but quite diverse in its own right. So we lived in an apartment, one bedroom, and it was me, my mom, and my older brother by 9 years, Trevor. And one bedroom. So me and my mom slept in the bedroom. My brother slept in the living room. And, that's what we knew. And, it was just the three of us. It was a trio. That was the family. When mom would go to work, my brother was my caretaker. Me and my brother were actually quite close for our age differences. We enjoyed time around each other. We would play wrestling and video games. And then, of course, once he got older and started, discovering girls and stuff, then he was off doing his thing. And I was sort of like the bratty, annoying little sister that would always tattle on him all the time. Our mom, very, very affectionate, very loving, disciplinarian, but still very, very affectionate and very loving. So it was always just us, just very close, always around each other. And, growing up, our mom, she was super, super supportive. She was never the kind of mom that was like, oh, you have to be X, or you have to be an astronaut, you have to be a scientist. She just let us know that whatever you do, excel and be the best at it. And she wanted us to follow our passions, which I really very much appreciated. So, I remember having a very warm and loving childhood, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but it's, you don't think about the factors when you're young that are considered barriers now or something that makes you disadvantaged. That wasn't in my awareness back then. It was just, us living in Brooklyn and me being a Brooklyn girl. So that was pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you. And I remember you mentioned that, like, so your family, you and your mom, like from the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about, like, are you an immigrant? Were you born here or in Caribbean, and which country in Caribbean?
So I do have to clarify that because we're from Guyana, which is located in South America, but the culture is very Caribbean in terms of accents, foods, and attitudes and things like that. So when I say I'm Caribbean, I just sort of give like sort of that pan-Caribbean like overlay, but actually Guyana is located in South America, right on top of Brazil, in between Venezuela and Suriname. So we're Guyanese. I am actually the only one that was born in the US. So my brother is from Guyana, naturalized citizen. My mother was born there, naturalized citizen. And a lot of my uncles and aunties are here, and many are still in Guyana. So yeah, but I grew up here.
I love how you shared that your mother instilled in you an emphasis on excelling, but also on finding your passion. And often I hear an either or there and a conflict between those two, but it sounds like she instilled both of those in you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And when you're a kid, you want to be every profession in the world. So what I love about my mother is that she really fostered that. So when I was young, I wanted to be doctor first, of course, an author, an illustrator, an astronaut, and a scientist, and a chef, and a veterinarian. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And what's fascinating is in just the few times we've worked together and I've met you, I would consider you a passionate doctor. Like you're both, So somehow you have found a way to weave those priorities or aspects into your identity.
Yeah,
professionally, it sounds like.
I can honestly say it was a calling, and I actually remember this. I have a vague memory of this. I was 3 years old. My mom was doing my hair, and she was asking me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a doctor. And she said, why do you want to be a doctor? And I said, because I want to help people. And I had no concept of medical school and any of those things, but what I had in my head, it was always this picture of me in a white coat holding someone's hand and just sort of looking at them lovingly and trying to reassure them. And that was my image of what a doctor did. That wasn't my experience when I'd go to the pediatrician and get some shots, but that was my conception of what a doctor was like. So it just appealed to me and just wanting to help people. And then I remember my mom saying, oh, that's so nice. That's so beautiful. And she would always foster that. So she'd buy me those little doctor kits. And I was just a terror. I'd go around bothering my mom and my brother, just opening up their eyes and like poking them and giving them like the fake injections and stuff. So she very early on fostered that. And the more exposure I had to medicine, the more I was passionate and excited about it. I love loved the sciences. And whenever I go to the doctor, I'd pay very close attention to the things they were using. I'd ask about, oh, what's this? And I was just very fascinated by the whole just ambiance of the patient room and all the little, like buttons and clicks and things. And I was just like, this is cool. So it felt right from the very beginning, and I stuck with it. So for me, I'd have to say it was a calling. I know many people enter medicine for different reasons, but it's always been with me, and here we are.
So I'm not hearing that it was about any pressure or any of that stuff. It was your heart. It was from your heart.
I'm fortunate in that way. Yeah, no, I really, really am. I mean, I appreciate my mother. She was never like, oh, you have to be this. It's just be the best at what you're doing. And so I'm sure she was thrilled when I chose medicine.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's I love it.
And I think what if I hear you, Sudha, I think your expression, when you just say that, I felt it, because in a lot of Asian communities, I assume that's similar in South Asian communities, that
yes,
a lot of us, our doctors, well, I have to say they become not doctor, they become doctors or physician, oftentimes as a family pressure, family expectation. Don't get me wrong, a lot of them are amazing doctors, good people, and they do want to help people too. But oftentimes the narrative, the story we have heard is that they have to go. Because family expectation pressure. So Kristel, it's just very refreshing to hear that it's your calling, it's something that you love, you want to do. And I bet you, and also while you were talking, it just reminded me the power of role models. And I think who you are right now, I bet you is going to inspire so many other women of color. So
I hope so. As you said that, it made me think of one thing that was very, very, very much instilled in me. And of course, my mother was a role model for that. Be an independent, self-sufficient woman. Do not depend or rely on a man for anything. And she can say that based on her specific experiences, but just watching her, do her thing, take care of us, provide, and always just have that tenacity in the face of just adversity and just push forward. That was very much instilled in me. And so I think just watching her do those things, I think it protected me from some of the self-doubt that a lot of people experience when they want to do something but feel like they can't, because she was always just very encouraging, very inspiring. And she modeled that for us. I'm going to do something and then go after it and try to be the best at it as I can be. So
awesome. So this kind of like a good segue to my follow-up question is that as an independent, self-sufficient woman, that when your moms are teaching you this since you were young, how does that correlation to the messages that you have learned or beliefs that you have learned about race and race relations in the United States since you were in Brooklyn, since like growing up?
Yes, excellent question. So when I think about like my early experiences, I did have this baseline understanding that long ago relations between white people and Black people were not so good. I had that mental understanding, but I also understood that now in the present, that's not the case. Things are better. So I always had that foundational understanding. That being said, from comments from my mother made, experiences from elders, there was definitely an air of mistrust around white people, or this idea of be very careful. And so that was something that was always there. And then I always could feel this sense of the anger of the past from elders. And there was a very big disconnect between my generation and the elders from that standpoint. But my mom was never like, don't be around white people. I mean, our neighborhood was diverse, so she was always a very open and loving person to everyone. And she taught us to be that way. But there was always that underlying message of be careful. And then also this idea of, be aware of how you will be perceived by non-Black people, white people. Be aware of how you'll be perceived. And she, made it clear that you may be perceived as less than. And so the message to that was, you have to be twice as good to have the same opportunities. And so that always stuck with me. My experiences as I got older, thankfully, were not fraught with, I think traumatic experiences of heavy racism, I'm thankful to say. Microaggressions and all that good stuff for sure. But those were the messages. It was, way back when there was some real deep trouble. Things are better now, but there's still these underlying tensions that you need to be aware of, and you need to be better than the best in order to have the same opportunities.
Yeah.
So your neighborhood was, you mentioned, quite diverse. How about your relationships, your friendships, your family growing up in that neighborhood, or school around your neighborhood?
I'm spoiled as a New Yorker. So like growing up in the neighborhood, it was mostly a predominantly Caribbean neighborhood, so Black Caribbeans, but it was that neighborhood feel, and you sort of had relationships with the business owners. So we had Jewish business owners, the kosher delis. We had our white business owners that have like the nice little donut shop, coffee shops. We had our, Kennedy Fried Chicken. Usually,
I would love some of that right about now.
Right, usually run by, a lot of, our Middle Eastern brothers and sisters. You had the beauty supply stores, Koreans, and then you had your Chinese greengrocers. So you saw the diversity, you felt it because, everything was just enmeshed, and that felt nice. And in grade school, when I think about the differences, it was our classes were predominantly black children, and then our teachers were white. And it's funny to think about this because I had one Black teacher in grade school. It was my 4th grade teacher, Miss Welch. And I always remember my experience in her class because she was very intent on reminding us of the history. Like she would show us videos, and I forgot the name of the series, but it was a series that showed all the documentary evidence about the marches during the 50s and the struggles and everything. And I just remember having a mix of emotions when I would watch that because I could feel her intent. She was like, you need to be aware. You need to know these things. And I understood where that came from on a superficial level because I was like 7, but I was also like, does she want me to be angry? I sort of had this idea of like, all right, but haven't we come through that? Haven't we come beyond that? But again, I'm a child at that point. So my understanding of these things wasn't that developed. As I got older, I really appreciate my high school experience. I went to Brooklyn Tech, which is one of like the big science high schools, and it is a very large high school. We had, I think, near, if not over 5,000 students. So it was incredibly diverse. I mean, high school felt like Canada. And by that, I mean, the diversity was ubiquitous, very evident, but it didn't call attention to itself. And it's very hard to sort of describe what I mean by that. But if you've ever been to Canada, or at least Toronto, it's incredibly diverse, but it just doesn't call attention to itself. Everything just feels very natural and open, no tension. And that's what high school felt like. And so I always—
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
No, Siri, I'm not talking to you.
So how would you say that experience, technology?
That's funny.
You always wonder who else is on the screen.
Jeff Bezos. I bet you Jeff Bezos is listening to us right now. Well, no, maybe Apple. I don't know.
Right now.
Wrong company. I'm sorry.
Right. So how would you say that informed your conception of your identity? And then also your family, your mom and brother coming from Guyana, and how did that fit into the mix of your identity?
Well, Guyana is actually quite diverse. Guyana has, white people, Chinese natives who grew up there, and Indians who grew up.
And a lot of South Asians, right? Yeah.
Yes. So, their experiences actually were of diversity as well. So, I mean, in high school, it just felt so natural, and it felt like this is how it should be in the world. I really appreciated that in high school. I was young then, but I loved the fact that I could look around me at the lunch table, and we were literally a diverse group of kids from backgrounds, racial identities, ethnicities, and just world experiences. And I think the one thing that we all commonly shared were that we were first generation American born kids. So we all sort of had that communal experience of having immigrant parents with certain attitudes about America. and certain tensions between the way we were assimilating. So we always sort of commiserate.
Do you remember the lunch table? I was just thinking about how like we both probably have had a lot of curry, you know? And I was thinking about like, did you all have like lunch from, you know, from all different backgrounds?
No, it was public school lunch. No, it was good old public school lunch with, you know, public school lunch. That was pretty much it.
Your shell macaroni.
Exactly. Your
chicken tenders.
Chicken fingers. Or, right.
Yes, yeah, chicken fingers.
So
cool.
That was
so, yeah. So let's kind of like moving along. So that was high school. And now let's jump to college. And maybe even post-college, secondary, higher grad school. You know, this whole continuum. You know, like maybe kind of share, you know, kind of your experience. You know, what was college like as a person of color, as a woman of color? You know, what diversity and inclusion, and you know, like your graduate school. You know, what's that like in medical school and all like, yeah.
So college was a bit of a culture shock in that way. College is like the first time I think I became more aware of, I guess, the tension between racial identities. And by that, I mean, sometimes feeling like I had to adhere to something. You know, you asked me before sort of how these experiences have informed my identity, and I'll just share a very quick tangential anecdote. One of my best friends from college, we were talking about something, and I can't remember, but he basically called me out on being a 14-year-old boy. And I was like, yes, and that is my identity. I am a 14-year-old homosexual boy. And it's weird to explain that, but I never quite feel like an adult. I'm very playful and silly. I'm a geek. And I always felt like I had this sort of youthful exuberance that I feel like hasn't gone anywhere. And I'm very happy about that. And
I love that about you.
I say boy because everything that has ever been described about me has been attributed to like masculine qualities. The way I walk, the way I assert myself, just my boldness. And I have to say, I've never, like, I identify more with masculinity than I do with femininity. And like, yeah, that's just always sort of been me. I've always gotten along more with like boys, men than women, and it just is what it is. But I always sort of like been described as someone who has masculine qualities. So when I think about just like the things I like, it's like stuff 14-year-old boys like. And so like, yeah, on the inside, I think I'm a 14-year-old boy. But yes, back to my experiences in college.
Makes me think of your brother, and I have all these questions, but I'm going to hold off on those.
So I guess college is sort of like my first experience of seeing diversity decrease, you know, being one of 2 Black people in the class, things like that. It never really bothered me. It just sort of, I'd always have like a brief disappointment that this is the reality, and always sort of a hope that it would change. And that was at least the most I would think about it, you know. But
where did you go to college, undergrad?
I went to Columbia University.
So you were in the city in a pretty diverse context.
And that was very important to me as well. I mean, I was curious about going away, but I really did want to stay in the city because I knew I wanted to continue to have my New York experience of diversity and still be somewhere where there was a campus life, but then have that ability to escape into the New York that I know. I would say one aspect of the culture shock was sort of getting an understanding of wealth disparities, and just in the way listening to how other students talked about money or talked about what their parents had, and I'd be like, oh, and you'd hear the smatterings of entitlement and privilege in those discussions. And you know, I think those were some of the things I started to pick up on that, you know, helped me sort of understand, okay, the broader aspects of the world as I got older. But college was a very good experience. That was a good 4 years. My friendship group was diverse, as I've always sort of, you know, as I've always sort of known. I would say one thing that sticks out in my mind was, you know, I was dating an Italian gentleman who was my first love at that time. And I do remember getting some curious, quizzical looks from some of my Black American peers. Nothing negative, nothing critical, but always sort of like this turn of the head, this like, huh. And
interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. I did have this one experience that a girlfriend asked me, she was like, what's it like dating a white guy? And I said, like dating someone with a penis. You know, like there's nothing too distinct there. But it definitely started to raise some of those questions and perceptions about interracial dating and how other people feel about it. So that was one thing I do distinctly remember from the college experience.
Did you get like, oh, I wonder what your kids would look like, or?
No, I mean, I remember a lot of that stuff from like trashy talk shows and just like you laugh about that stuff.
What's that one? Jerry Springer.
Exactly. But, you know, for the most part, I can say nothing ever negative, but, you know, you get your stares. Even in New York, you get your stares. And I'm just like, that's disappointing because, like, why, you know? So that's something I do remember from
You felt a disappointment.
Yes.
That people were disappointed.
Yeah, you know, a lot of disappointments throughout life in terms of humanity and the things you get exposed to. But I would say med school was a return to diversity, very, very happily so. So I went to Yale Med School, loved it. I highly recommend it as a med school. If anyone wants to go to med school, like no stress. And it's weird to say, like no stress. My only stress was taking my boards, but like that was the place for me. And our class was touted as like the most diverse class in like how many years. So we had like over a quarter of our students who were Pacific Islander, African, Caribbean, Hawaiian, like Cuban, like all over the map. Also diversity in ages. So we had some people that had done grad school before, married with kids. And so we had a very diverse class, not just from race and ethnicities, but also just life experience. And that was also very, very meaningful. Now, you're also at Yale, which is a very old institution. So when you're there, you're walking around and you see all these lovely portraits of these old white men. And it's just like...
And in the context of New Haven, Connecticut, and New England.
I mean, you got the Yale bubble, yet New Haven was one of the most poorest cities in the country with, you know, levels of crime. So when you left the Yale bubble, it was literally... one block is pretty New England. Next block is, oh, am I in parts of Brooklyn again? Yeah. So, you know, so that discontinuity was always there, and it was always very interesting to me. But in terms of my cohort with my colleagues in my class, it felt very comfortable, very natural. We were a very, very cohesive class. So I have to say I'm very, very thankful for that. And then afterwards, towards residency training, it's a smaller group of kids. So it's like, you know, 12 of us, and we're MDs and psychiatrists in training. Also very diverse.
So you determine, before residency, you determine your specialty in psychiatry?
Oh, yes. And that,
can you say a little bit more about that process for you and what led you to psychiatry?
That's a long one, but I'll try to keep it succinct. So med school is 4 years, right? Your third and your fourth years are when you do like your more clinical rotations with patients and sort of working with the team. So after all the rotations, OB-GYN, internal medicine, you know, endocrine, all that stuff, I was down to 2 specialties, psychiatry and surgery. Those are the 2 favorites. And I think a lot of people think those are very binary, they're very different. But actually, when I talked with the surgeons and I talked with the psychiatry attendings, both of them said, I loved the other rotation. So the psychiatrists also had really loved surgery. The surgeons also had really liked psychiatry. And when I spoke to them, they actually said that my conflict was very common. And I was like, interesting. And, you know, some of the ideas behind that are, you know, when you're a surgeon or a psychiatrist, it's very invasive. A surgeon is invasively going into your body. A psychiatrist is invasively going into your mind and your life. And also with both of those, you are the instrument of treatment. You know, so the surgeon, my hands, I'm going, you know, into you and fixing things. As a psychiatrist, I'm talking to you, I'm listening to you, and I'm the one that's sort of trying to help you do that self-exploration. So when it was explained to me that way, I was like, oh, wow, this is, you know, this is really intense. And finally, what helped me come down to the final decision was really thinking about my personality and what I wanted from my life. And I was a very pragmatic person, still am. And every rotation, I sort of observed things and I said, okay, whatever I choose, I know there's going to be bullshit that I don't like. Oops, excuse me, it happened. All right, I know there's going to be things that I don't like, but what I like about my job has to outweigh what I don't like about my job. That was the requirement. And surgery, I mean, it's addictive. You're in that room, you're zoned in. So I loved the act of surgery itself. I was good on every other aspect of it. The hours, the personalities, the hours.
Oh.
And it was just like, I was like, I think that these things are going to have a deeper impact than I give them credit for. And thankfully I had enough self-awareness to really understand that. And with psychiatry, I loved everything about it. I missed the fact that there weren't procedures, but that was a minor con with all the pros that I had. And so the choice was pretty obvious, and I'm very happy that I made that choice. And
somehow it fits with what you said earlier about, we talked about you being a doctor and being passionate. And so it seems like it would so fit with you connecting with people's hearts. I think of kind of psychiatry and psychology as really connecting at the heart and soul, and so it doesn't surprise me that it was almost the integration of worlds and what you were looking for in a way.
It really was. And of all the specialties, the medical specialties, psychiatry felt like the only one that was trying to care for the whole person. It wasn't just that particular bodily system. It was, how can I help you help yourself? And if this is okay, everything else is okay, for the most part. If this isn't okay, nothing's going to be okay. And I recognize that in psychiatry.
So true.
And I was like, oh, wow. And I just loved, even just on a logistic level, you get to spend time with patients. When you do those medical rotations, you actually get to see what the world of medicine and healthcare is really like, and talk about disillusionment. Oh my God. So as I started to see that, I got very disappointed in what things actually looked like. But with psychiatry, consistently across the board, I could spend time with someone. I could look them in the eye. I could just have a conversation. I could laugh. And I really, really enjoyed that, because I saw just from the rapport building, people would respond and people would open up. And the more I would do that, the more curious I became about people and just the overall human experience. And as a psychiatrist, you hear about all the other medical stuff. Oftentimes I end up being like a primary care doctor because they're not seeing anybody else. They don't trust anybody else. So it's something that really sort of clued me into the fact that not only is this a very difficult medical specialty, but it's the one that I think really observes a person as a whole and tries to approach them as a whole.
Yeah,
sorry. I was just thinking about how you wanted to connect with people as a whole, but also it sounds like with psychiatry, you could bring your whole self into what you did. Whereas with some of the other specialties, you perhaps had to blunt or compartmentalize parts of yourself a little bit more, perhaps?
It felt like that at times. Like, for example, surgeons, surgeons are sometimes considered assholes, and that's not true across the board. But I think the nature of the specialty gives them a sense of superiority and entitlement.
Little arrogance sometimes, yeah.
And I never liked that, and I was very resistant to that, and I sort of feared. I wouldn't say I feared, but there was that pull of, I need to be a little bit like this in order to like get along with the boys. And I got along with them just fine. But I was worried about how the rigor and just sort of the hours, just like the way the field is constructed, plus being in that environment, I was really worried about how it might change my personality, especially at an unconscious level. And so I wanted to avoid that. There were other specialties where you could see the doctors were miserable, and that just sort of clued me in. I'm like, that's not going to be me. So it was always, I don't want to toot my own horn in terms of self-awareness, but I can say that I was self-aware enough, probably focusing on my selfishness, to avoid things that I knew would either change my personality in a negative way or just day to day bring me to a place that just wasn't healthy or constructive. And I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that a happy doctor is a good doctor. And I adhere to that day to day. I only was able to articulate that in my adult life. And so I stick with that. So I always sort of kept, myself in that calculus of what I wanted to do, because I wanted to maintain myself as I did this work for many, many years to come.
This is good. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think what you just shared, at least for me, it has given me like a different perspective of seeing psychiatrists and surgeons, doctors side. Because in mental health setting, when we hear of psychiatrists, we just think that they're psychologists that can prescribe pills. End of story. And the way that you just describe it, that there's more to it, that there's more, this whole health approach, not only physical, I think it was beautiful. It's beautiful. So in respect of time, I know we are running out of time a little bit. Let's just connect everything together a little bit, but back to the whole purpose of this podcast series, Great Minds, crossing cultures, crossing race, crossing everything. How has your practice in psychiatry intersect with race, identity, genders, and maybe even just throw in, what's your hope? What's your hope for humanity? I know, just
particularly at this point.
You only have like 2 minutes.
Let's have that easy question at the end. Well, okay. So I trained at Bellevue Hospital. It's the oldest city hospital in the country. And that is where I experienced all of the diversity of humanity, race, ethnicity that you can ever hope for in the mental health space. And so that very much just blew my mind up, because, for example, if I go on the inpatient unit, you have your wealthy business executive there, plus your young college student, plus your homeless gentleman there who's shadowboxing in the corner, plus everyone in between. And that really showed me that mental illness does not discriminate. Mental illness doesn't care about where you're from. Mental illness can touch anyone at any time. And as I became more curious about people and work with people, this job has taught me how to be curious about the human experience. And I think when we think about anxiety and anger and all these different things that keep us from exploring topics that make us uncomfortable, I inject the word curiosity. How can we be curious about each other? How can we be curious about ourselves? And so even in my practice now, treating all different kinds of people from all different backgrounds, socioeconomic status, it always reminds me of our shared humanity. The problems are across the board: trauma, parental discord, the stigma. It just repeats and repeats and repeats. And yes, there are nuances, but when I think about the human problems that we all share, they're across the board, they're everywhere. And so
you're treating people at their core, so kind of inside of all of those features on our surface.
Exactly. And a lot of times, race, ethnicity, and racial trauma will come up in those things. And that's a part of the human experience. And, when you ask about the hope for humanity, I actually, wrote it down because, it's not an easy question. So first thing, I would like all of us to start accepting the harm we're causing the planet and to do something about it. So boom, that's one. But also that we start to internalize the fact that race is a socio-political construct with no basis in biological fact. And there is one human race. And I wish we could unite by thinking about it as a common struggle for the equal dignity of all humankind. And I really, really wish we can get to that place and just remind ourselves we are one species. Try to envision that. We're just one species. And the differences that we use as barriers, as you said earlier, those are things to be celebrated. And if we can each sort of think of another person as an equal human being worthy of dignity and respect, and always just start there, if everyone did that, I think the world might be a better place, better than it is now, I hope. But yeah.
That is incredible. Thank you so much for, like what you have shared. It just makes me even more excited and grateful for this opportunity to continue to learn more about you and hear your experience and wisdom. So I'm just grateful that we are doing this podcast-ish. That like
very inspiring.
Yes, very inspiring. And
so you're cool too. It's like you're brilliant, you're cool, you're like the whole package deal.
I know, yeah.
Very kind.
Lucky to have you with us.
It's funny, earlier you mentioned that people were like teasing you, so you were like 14 years old boy. Yeah, I feel like you okay, coming from me, a dude. I feel like you just want the guys, like that's cool.
Earlier I was thinking that you used that skill to be able to connect with those male peers in med school where other people may have had a different experience in med school. So you're also kind of able to kind of use aspects of yourself, your strengths, I think, to excel and succeed in different contexts that you're in, which is really remarkable and something that I think, can be just so inspirational and just such a role model for so many people.
Yes. So
get me up, guys.
Blushing. Are you blushing?
Yes. So in closing, let's play this little very fast Q&A. In closing, because we know that in our cultures, the thing that connects all of us is food. Food, right? So what was the best dish that you have eaten this whole week?
Oh.
Well, your favorite dish, well, whatever, so start off with Kristel. Well, it could be something that you made, you water out, your favorite dish that you had this week.
JR's really hungry right now.
Yeah. So some of you, Kristel and Suda, and I can share.
This week is, let me see, Monday, it's Thursday, right? All right, Monday, Tuesday.
It's Thursday.
No.
Notice how Kristel thinks very
I'm a foodie, so this question needs, it needs the respect that it deserves. I'm ashamed to say pizza, but this pizza place is really good. But that's because it's been a busy week and I haven't been cooking. But I'll say pizza. We've been ordering now.
Pizza. Okay, please. Pizza. Awesome. How about you, Sita?
I've not eaten anything hugely interesting this week. But I will say at my workplace here, we just had a lovely gathering, which is unique at these times, and had a potluck type thing. And one of our psychologists baked the most amazing blueberry scones. So I would say that was at the top of my list this week.
Nice. Awesome.
Very thankful for my workplace.
So yeah, for me, it's Chicago deep dish pizza. So I was in a wedding in Michigan over the weekend. I flew back through Chicago on Sunday midway. So I went to got one of those half cooked frozen one, and I just carry it with me back to Denver. And I baked it on Monday or Tuesday. It was so good.
So food can get past security and everything?
Carry on. Yeah, carry on. So you just have to take it out. So awesome. Pizza, blueberry scones, and deep dish pizza. Awesome. Now I'm really hungry.
Thing going on. Now I'm really hungry.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's close this out. Again, thank you so much for those people that are watching, listening to this. And again, thank you so much, Kristel, for sharing, your story, your experience, of course, Suda, all of your questions. So please stay tuned for our next episode, which is, I think we're going to interview Suda next. So please stay tuned and enjoy the rest of your day, whatever you are doing. All right. Bye.
Looking forward to working